You're watching Daybreak, reaching you live from the nation's capital. Now, we'll be going into our first discussion on the program. Now, 1 in every 3 Nigerians have plans to migrate out of the country. The reason is not far-fetched. The song on the lips of everyone is insecurity of their lives and properties and dilapidated economy, corruption and terrorism. The security situation in the nation is growing exponentially. As each day passes by, the nation's state of unrest will completely turn everywhere to miasma of bloodletting if vital steps are not taken, and that the havoc being wreaked by rebellious individuals is deadly across everywhere in the country. Now, to give us perspectives on this, we have security consultant Dr. Yahuza Ahmad Geto in the studio to talk to us about recent happenings. Welcome to Daybreak. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. Thank you, Zainab. Good morning once again. Good morning, viewers.
All right. Well, I mean, the conversations, I hope that they are changing because we've been having quite a lot of conversations in the past few years, as far as security is concerned. We are seeing this morning on the front page of Daily Trust newspaper, if I may get your thought on that, about, bandits closing in on Kaduna metropolis. If you look at, recent happenings around the city center there in Maiduguri. Should we be worried? I mean, if I ask that, it's probably insensitive, but we should be worried, isn't it?
Well, this didn't come to me as a surprise, which I have alerted the Kaduna state government and the federal government as well as the security operatives and security architecture itself of Kaduna state, not only the government, but even the traditional authorities, the philanthropists. In a number of clarion call I made and a number of presentation or discussions or chats I have had with either media, the civil society organizations, the corporate structures, as well as the in-house and internal room discussions with those who are responsible in respect to issues around the security and safety and challenges in Kaduna State. I have made mention so many times that the bandits leadership have made Zaria to be their meeting and planning venue, whereby many of them do come from Niger, from Zamfara, from other part of Kaduna, from other part of Katsina, Sokoto, and all the environs, all the affected states, inclusive of those from northeastern part of the country. Because I could remember that there was a time when a meeting was held between ISWAP, Boko Haram, Ansaru, and some selected leaders among the commanders of the bandits groups, the notorious part of them. And they had the meeting in Kaduna State, and the meeting was conducted very close to, not up to 30 to 50 kilometers from Kaduna. In fact, it happened somewhere between Binyero and Marabanjos. And then there was also a time when such activity also took place around Ragachukun, and all these times, when these activities happen, I normally alert the government and the security operatives to be careful and to be cautious of what happened. And then if you look at the time when bandits abducted students from the forestry school, that of Bethel, that of this Greenfield University, all these allocations around the metropolis. And at the same time, these bandits, they don't have a mark. And they do gather information. And at the same time, I made mention one time, not quite 40 days ago, that the military as well as the security operatives, or rather the government, is deceiving Nigerians. Why? Because if you look at the distance between Kaduna and Binnungwari, it's not really far. So the old machines, the old APC, 2 APC only dedicated to Kaduna Binnungwari. Those 2 APC are really old machines. And the bandits do generate information between Mondo and its environs, which is very close to the Air Force base, and somewhere around the Nigerian Defense Academy, NDA. So they normally know when the APC is available. Those old APC machines are available, or when they are taken, because they operate for 1 week, and then the other week they will be delivered back to the workshop for check-in and other things. Okay. So those areas of Mando, Mando Garage, Mando Extreme End, the attack being launched at the Nigerian Defense Academy itself, the Binniyaro, many issues around Binniyaro, Barakallahu, as well as the part of Kao, many issues that happens around the Kaduna New Millennium City, and then going to Dambushia, going to Kakuri, Marabarido, as well as the Kaduna Abuja Junction, and some few kilometer communities. You know, many times people tend to look at Kateri, Jere, and probably as the only key places where bandits are keeping their eyes, or planning, or their hideouts. Sometimes people talk about Rijana. If you look at the Rijana, between the Rijana to Kaduna Metropolis, it's very close. So it is not now. Yes, of course, it's good that...
so are you saying that there's not enough deployment of, you know, hardware, you know, military hardware around those axes?
Well, I think
when you talk about 2 APCs only.
Yeah, when you talk of the hardware, it is not only hardware. There is no availability. If you say no availability of hardwares, you are very correct. And if you say there are no adequate personnel to manage even the old machines, hardware, the available hardwares, you are very correct. And if you say there are no availability or inadequacy of the personnel themselves, you are very correct.
But these are flashpoints, isn't it? We should have stationed. Does this now validate the call by the Governor Nasir El-Rufai to say that maybe we should consider establishing theater command, you know, in Maiduguri, just like we have in the northeastern Borno State?
Yes, of course, we should have in Kaduna State. Why? Because the distance between Kaduna and Binnungwari is not up to 160 kilometers. And if you take almost 40 kilometers out of out of this, you have is almost within Kaduna Metropolis.
Okay, so
and the machineries that you're supposed to have for fighting insurgency, that's supposed to be managing the country, is also around that vicinity. Nigerian Defense Academy is where Nigerian Air Force are being trained, are receiving training, primary level training. Nigerian Army, primary level training, Nigerian Air Force, Nigerian Navy, primary level training, as well as inclusive
but you know,
the other law enforcement agencies.
This sounds very unbelievable, really, because if you say just 2 APCs, you know, I find it very hard to believe. Because if you look at Kaduna itself, you know, it's known to be like a military zone in itself. Let me tell you where we have all the military formations.
Let me tell you one thing. If Nigerian Army or Nigerian security operatives, if they argue with me, they should bring their evidence, and I have my evidence. It is the absence. We have very agile, enthusiastic, and ready to work military personnel around that area. They are not enough, of course, but those little number that we have, they are well determined. If not because of their determination, if not because of their patriotism, if not because of their dedication, I want to tell you sincerely that many more people will have been will have been killed, much more than the number that are being killed.
Okay,
much more than the number that are being assassinated.
Okay.
My reason, I want to tell you that the days when, do you know that you cannot go to Binnungwari without escort from Kaduna? So, and those days when the APC is available to escort the commuters. I want to tell you, those days you hardly find the bandits coming out to chase the commuters. But on the days that they have information that those two APCs are not around, one APC will be escorting from Kaduna, the other one will be escorting from Benungwari ending.
So is it because of the lack of hardwares,
yes,
that the Borno State governor, is notifying, the federal government of the threat of ISWAP?
Well, not only because of that, but because of the issues of inadequate personnel. Because it is very clear that all the security operatives don't have enough personnel to face the challenges we have. Okay,
so let's take a look at the interview of the Borno State governor.
The insurgency has triggered acute humanitarian and post-displacement crisis with devastating social and economic impact on the population, further deepening fragility and poverty in the northeast sub-region. The outcome of the recovery and peace-building assessment by the World Bank, EU, and UN revealed that the total sum of about $6.9 billion was lost as a result of the insurgency in the entire northeastern state. Out of this, Borno State accounts for over 2/3%. The insurgents have destroyed about 5,000 classrooms in Borno State. About 800 municipal buildings were destroyed, comprising of local government secretariat, prisons, traditional rulers' buildings, among others. They destroyed about 713 energy distribution lines. Furthermore, they destroyed about 1,600 water sources. In addition to this one, we harvested a total number of about 49,311 widows and about 49,917 orphans. These are official figures. The unofficial figures are more than this. We have seen in Borno State, the incidences of bomb attacks has been reduced drastically. Yes. For how long? Before then, on a daily basis, we have been witnessing bombings throughout Borno State. But this has been reduced by about 80%, if not more than 90%. Reconstruction of lives and livelihoods embarked upon relentlessly. Over 5,000 physical infrastructure built by the state and federal government. Partnership with international community helped to strengthen government efforts. We partner with international organizations. Yes, sometimes we differ in our own understandings, but most importantly, the UN OCHA, the UN agencies, and some international organizations and local organizations have given great support to the government of Borno State because we have what we call a return strategy. High-level steering committee meeting headed by the deputy governor. Membership cut across different strata.
Well, there you have it. The governor of Borno State giving a breakdown of the losses incurred as a result of the, damages caused by Boko Haram, in the state, raising the need and calling for the need for urgent, efforts to make sure that they do not grow beyond what they are right now, so that the country can be secured. Now, Dr. Yahuza, well, you have seen the breakdown, of the numbers, the kind of losses that has been incurred, and the kind of efforts that the Borno State government is making to, improve the lives of citizens in the state. Now, it appears to me as though these terrorists have moved away, slightly from the northeast. The governor there alluded to the fact that the kind of suicide bombings that were experienced in the past, over there in the northeast is no longer the case. There's massive reduction in that. And then instead, we've seen more attacks in the northwestern part of the country. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, actually, that doesn't mean that the capacity of the Boko Haram is weakened. That doesn't mean that the Boko Haram is withdrawing or has withdrawn from Borno State. Rather, I take it as a kind of slowdown to strategize. So government shouldn't take it for granted. And even though I commend Governor Umara Zulum of Borno State for for his practice, for demonstrating and exhibiting his ability, concern, and also feelings, and expressing his feelings. I wonder even when this man is sleeping. Because he is really doing so much, to the extent that we can say that in practice, you can say that he is the best among all the governors in Nigeria in terms of governance, because he carries along everybody in kind of the messages he is, because it is not only talking through the media, but rather we see him in practice doing certain things. So I urge the government of Borno State, as well as the federal government, not to assume that Boko Haram has been defeated in Borno. That is why all these type of attacks are not being launched.
You know, following that, the federal government is saying that no territory under terror group, is insisting that there is no territory right now that is under a terror group. Well,
that is just for mere saying, and it will not be given any weight. Their words cannot carry any weight, because it's kind of exposing their insincerity and inability to manage situation. Because if at all, if you look at, for example, it is after 6 years, 10 months, that was the time when government is saying that we now know the finances of the Boko Haram. After all, long before, you have been saying that we know the finances of Boko Haram, we know the finances of bandits and all other types of criminals. So as far as I'm concerned, it has no iota of any truth in terms of saying that no territory is under. If there is no territory,
we've heard that from the governor. But we've heard that from the governor of Borno State. We have heard that from the governor of Borno State, where he said that only 2, territories, are left under the control of Boko Haram, well, as against more than 20 that was the case back in 2015.
Because if really that is the true situation on ground, why do they refuse to return all the IDPs back to their communities?
No, that has been done. I mean, so, about 7 of the IDP camps in Maiduguri Metropolis, for instance, have been closed already. So, out of 13.
So this is a kind of encouraging information. We cannot, but we wait until a number of months before we conclude that yes, it is true or not. And despite the fact that we're having all these stories, all this information coming through the governor, coming through the federal government, we are still seeing records of some few attacks. Even last week, recently, about 3 days ago, there was an attack somewhere around the Biu area, which was the armed operation groups, even though the security operatives around have repelled it. So, yes, of course, it is kind of encouraging information, and then it's a commendable effort by the government.
As a strategy, for the terrorists, how do we, how can we assess, the performance of, our armed forces and the military when you see that these terrorists, they are very strategic in carrying out attacks? We understand that there are some attacks that are being carried out purposely just to send a message, not as if they are, as strong as they claim to be, but rather, just to send certain kind of messages. For instance, in the eve of President Muhammadu Buhari's visit to Maiduguri recently, we saw that there was an explosion there. I mean, that's not the usual thing, in the state in the recent times. But we saw that happen, and so, people are now saying, oh, because of that, the security situation in Borno State, are still, is still, as bad. So, how do we assess, the security situation in a place? If you look at some of these strategies that these terrorists deploy?
Well, we can make assessment. There are very simple ways we can make assessment. 1, reduction in the number of attacks. 2, ability of the businesses to go back, to come back. especially the people that are moving back to their locations, are being redeployed, the IDPs. And 3, the ability of the security personnel to kind of repel or continue to fast track generate intelligence and then utilize the intelligence in terms of making sure that not only when the Boko Haram or ISWAP is attacking a given community or sending a certain message, but their ability to generate information, intelligence information, and use it in making sure that they crippled more of the capabilities, abilities, as well as the coordination mechanism of the Boko Haram and ISWAP and so on and so forth.
Okay.
And then at the same time, we can also assess the performance of our military in terms of a reduction in kind of improved monitoring, because that's what tells you that the military are doing much better in terms of monitoring, in terms of tracking, in terms of information generation and utilization, in terms of improved relationship with a kind of collaborative relationship and partnership. And then we also assess that by understanding the reduction in a competitive situation, whereby before we used to have a competition between the military, even the cycle of the Nigerian military between the Air Force and the army.
Okay.
And then so you see all these things are part of the measuring instruments that we can use, and many more.
Okay. Now, Governor Zulum, of Borno State, in that ministerial briefing, explicitly emphasized on, ISWAP's threat, and he mentioned that we might need some form of external support.
Well, I quite disagree. Yes, of course, we may need external support in terms of hardware. We may need external support in terms of armaments. We may need external support in terms of capacity building, training and retraining of our personnel, both the uniform personnel and the non-uniform personnel, that is the DSS, the police, the army, the Air Force, the Navy, and so on and so forth. It's very important. But I quite disagree in terms of engaging personnel from other nations to come to Nigeria, because 1, will expose our economy, 2, they will have impact on the future of our intelligence gathering, intelligence management, intelligence monitoring, and at the same time they will also have impact in our economy and even political, inclusive of administration. Because when they will come with a vision, and definitely there will be a signed agreement. So I believe so much that we have the capability, we have the ability, and we have the manpower that we can utilize if we can engage them. Let's assume that we have a strategy that we use for our leadership recruitment, which is engagement right from the polling unit. So why can't we use the same strategy? Engage 40 youths between the age of 18 to 22 per polling unit. So if you have 10 polling units in a political ward, you will have 400. If you have 10 political ward in a local government, you will have 4,000. So if you have youths between the age of 17 to 22 engaged, and you build their capacity, you give them training, and then you partner with foreign countries or any other foreign agency that have the capability, you send them to have their capacity built, or rather, the present machineries that we have, the military who are working, you send them out for training, let them come back and build the capacity of the manpower available in country so that we can utilize it in managing the situation. But I quite disagree on bringing any personnel, any manpower from outside the country, because that will threaten our own security. Yes, of course, ISWAP has to be, it is very clear, even before Zulum says it, we have been talking about it, that because it is a bilateral structure, it is a multilateral structure. ISWAP is a structure that have a collaboration and partnership not only within the criminal cycle of Nigeria. I have made mention in the discussion earlier that I know the time when ISWAP, Boko Haram, bandits inclusive of some of the agitators, had a meeting in Kaduna, and they had a meeting in Zaria, and they had a meeting somewhere around Binungwari. And I know the time when they also had a meeting somewhere between Zamfara, Kaduna, and Katsina State, in an environment around where most of the bandits are now camping. That is the Munya forest. I know all these times. So it means that ISWAP is not a kind of a national structure. It's not a national. It's not only posing a national threat. It is rather posing an international, bilateral, and multilateral threat. So West African states, not only Nigeria. Nigeria as the most biggest and the most powerful and the biggest in terms of economic capability country, need to kind of partner with its neighbors, especially to change the strategy of the way we have a kind of memorandum of understanding in terms of managing security issues and intelligence between Nigeria, the Anglophone and Francophone countries. Because that needs to be taken with a whole seriousness. Everybody, anybody that who is an intelligence during Abacha administration, between Shonikan Abacha and that of the period of Babangida, there are a number of things that I cannot expose them in the media. But those in the intelligence who know what I know, who know what we have been discussing in the recent time, and especially within the years of 2017 and 2018, we have had a number of intelligence caucus that we have been discussing a certain number of things that really kind of multiply to what we are now. And if care is not taken, it is going to be worse than what it is. So I think it is very important. Myself and alike, and those who work between the Shonikan administration, the Abacha administration, as well as the first 2 years of Obasanjo, we know ourselves and we know what we know. Let's come back together to the same caucus, the same discussions. Let's go back to the same table and see how we can help. Nigeria is our country and we have no place to live better than Nigeria. So let's come back. Those among us that have fled out of the country, I urge them to please, even though I've been sending them messages and I've been talking to them, please come back to Nigeria. It's our country. We have to come and plan and work with whatever machineries, whether they like us or they don't like us. Let's come back and at least speak out, say out our mind and speak and write what we know and send to them. So I'm very optimistic and I believe that ISWAP is a big threat, and I commend Zulum for all the efforts he has been making and all the kind of the briefing he makes. It is really touching, and I really commend him for all he has been doing.
Okay, so now, what impact would you say the uncovering of terrorism financiers will have, in the fight against terrorism?
Well, I want to tell you that what we need is not only covering them, but is punishing them. And punishing them, we have provision in the Constitution. So let the government be more proactive. Those who are found wanting, the judiciary and the executives should do the needful to ensure that they are punished on time, so that that can be a message to those who are interested in what they are doing and to those who are yet to be covered. Yes, the government have said many times, we know the finances of Boko Haram, we know the finances of bandits. If you know them, in recent time, one of the bandits in Northwestern State made mention that he bought arm of to the tune of 28 point something million, which I know there are many others who bought much more than that. And I have written a lot of memos and a lot of notifications, and I have conducted a lot of advocacy visits to a certain security formations at the states and the federal level to inform them, to provide them with intelligence about all those movements of money for the purchase of arms. So I believe sincerely and honestly that we have a system failure. And it is the responsibility of you and me and everybody that we need to come back to the drawing table, engage those who know what they know, and ensure that those who are covered to be responsible for financing or a kind of being in partnership with any criminal activity, let them be dealt with according to the provision of the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, to serve as a message and as a deterrence for others not to be part of what they are doing. Nigeria is our country,
now
and we must sit to our responsibility.
Look, talking about those who have been, identified as financiers of Boko Haram, I mean, last year around March, we saw that about 400 BDC operators, were arrested, and we are aware about that. In Kano, just a few days ago, there was a protest, or rather, a demonstration, by their wives, marching to the Emir's palace there in the state. And the issue is that, yes, they have been arrested, but from what we are gathering, they haven't been charged. I mean, the trial has not commenced in court. Even the Minister of Justice, the Minister of Information that informed us, about the recent 96 undercover of the financiers of Boko Haram, said, about 45 of them have been arrested and they will soon be charged to court. Meaning that prosecution has not commenced. How important is time, in regards to, finding justice in these matters?
One of the weaknesses of Buhari administration in general is inability to translate its words into action. They have made mention that they are fighting corruption. We have not seen anything. They have made mention that they want to fight, or they are fighting insurgency. Sometimes in 2017, Lai Mohammed made mention that they know the finances of Boko Haram and whatever. In recent time, the Attorney General of the Federation, in a statement credited to him, made almost the same statement. So the problem is delay in justice. Delay in justice. One is encouraging others to be part of the same criminality, is exposing the government for its lack of sincerity in purpose. It is expressing or kind of exposing the weakness of our judicial system. It is exposing the type of government we have, how irresponsible they are, how unserious they are, and how incapable they are. And it's also
if it's a government,
let me tell you, yes, of course, it's a government responsibility.
Again, the government, say for instance the president, he works with institutions, and the judiciary is an arm of government on its own, and time without numbers.
That is
we have heard how the president says he is not going to interfere with judicial processes.
Yes.
So who is supposed to be responsible in this instance?
That is why I said it exposes the weakness of our judicial system. So, which means we are sending message to the judicial system that go back to the table and fix your house. It means that that's why I earlier mentioned that we have a system failure. And it is your responsibility and my responsibility and everybody's responsibility to fix these failures so that it will stop affecting us. Because this is something that affects you, affects her, and affects me, and almost affecting each and everyone.
All right, thank you for staying with us. You're watching Daybreak, reaching you live from the nation's capital in Abuja. We have in the studio Dr. Yahuza Ahmed Geto, a security consultant, giving us perspectives on recent happenings as far as security in Nigeria is concerned. Now, we were talking about, the judiciary and its role in terms of bringing to justice those who have been arrested or identified as financiers, of terrorism and Boko Haram in the country. A lot of arrests have been made. The minister have said that about 285 cases are before the courts, in the country. But yet we see very little in terms of conviction. Why the lack? Do you think that, for instance, we should maybe look at, special courts that will try specifically issues that has to do with terrorism?
Why do we have to duplicate efforts? That is a duplication of efforts. It is the inability of the supervising minister, who is the Attorney General of the Federation, that is making the judicial system of Nigeria very weak. Because if at all he is sitting to his responsibility and doing his job as expected, we wouldn't have had a situation whereby the government that is claiming to be kind of sent wouldn't have found to be wanting of keeping, those who have been arrested in Kano in the last 1 year. They are still in the arrest, and they are still within the kind of under the either the monitoring of DSS or whatever, but they have not been prosecuted to court. They're supposed to be charged. So if at all government keep telling us that we know the finances of the Boko Haram, we have arrested so number of people, and we have arrested 40 recently, and we are going to arrest more. So that is not what Nigerians want to see. What Nigerians want to see is charging these guys to court, and let the court decide. So from there, whatever action should be translated into whatever they were found to be guilty on, they should be dealt with accordingly, going by the provision of the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. But because of the weaknesses of the government itself and the weaknesses of the system, of the judicial system, that is why we're having all these stories. Because as far as I'm concerned, and as far as Nigerians are concerned, Lai Mohammed is just telling stories and is really telling us that how incapable their government is.
Okay. Now, to really, tackle these threats, what are the strategies required?
What the strategy requires is, one, you arrested somebody, take him to court. If he is found guilty, let him be dealt with accordingly, so that that can serve as a lessons to others, to deter others from participating. Now, you arrested huge amount, what's the number in Kano, sometimes 400. Back? 400. So yet, those 400 that have been arrested between Kano and other places, they are still under arrest, and they have not been prosecuted to court. That is why we are having more number. So now recently you have arrested 40, and you said you are going to arrest more. So is it only that arrest story that Nigerians want to hear? Will the arrest deter others from doing so? Which means that you are even making it because of the kind of economic hardship we are in, and then other situations and the inability of the government to manage issues accordingly, the issue of corruption, the issue of corroboration and collaboration and partnership in terms of money laundering and other strategies being used for corrupt practices. That is why we are going to have more and more people participating in this criminality.
All right. Now, let me take you on this, other issue about, resettlement of IDPs in Borno, for instance. This is also coming at a time where we have seen thousands of, Boko Haram members surrender. I mean, somewhere around more than 20,000 so far, from what we've gathered, have surrendered. And then at the same time, we are closing IDP camps, resettling those people back to their communities. Do you think that there's a problem with that in terms of, these two groups? On one hand, you have IDPs, on the other hand, you have, Boko Haram.
I commend the federal government as well as the Borno state government for their ability to kind of resettle or take back the IDPs back to their communities. And at the same time, I urge on government and all the security operatives to extend a more schemic monitoring strategy in terms of looking at those who claim to be to repent from Boko Haram, because we have had lessons of what happened sometimes in Gombe during Obasanjo administration, when some of the Boko Haram so-called were camped, the so-called repentance were camped, and we know what happened. So we need to learn our lesson out of that. It's a really commendable effort, and of course it's encouraging, but at the same time government need to be careful, security operatives need to be careful, because that may be a deceit, because never you can trust those boys that have been recruited. And I assume that it is an opportunity, if at all up to 20,000 have been repented. It's a good opportunity for government to use them in order to mobilize information, to generate intelligence that can be utilized in kind of destroying the rest of the structure of the Boko Haram within the Borno axis, the part of Adamawa, part of Gombe, part of Yobe, and all other parts where they are. And then at the same time, block all chances for them to reoccur, and at the same time also find it as a strategy to also destroy or weaken the ISWAP structure that is being promoted. Because as you have heard, during the ministerial briefing made by the governor of Borno State, Professor Bulum, he made it very clear that he has more concern about the threat of ISWAP. So, but I believe that much more than 30%, if not more than that, of those members of the ISWAP emerged from the Boko Haram initiative.
Right.
So I believe that those who repented must have a very good knowledge or some key elements and some key knowledge, information that they will help the intelligence system in kind of dealing with the situation, knowing about especially the issues, source of supply chain mechanism and the procurement process.
Okay.
And if that can be destroyed, the procurement and supply chain mechanism, the kind of bilateral and multilateral relation, and then the armories, the armament management, and so on and so forth. And the recruitment process of the ISWAP.
You talk about bilateral relations, and I want to touch on that. Over the past few days, we've seen meetings by African leaders at the level of the ECOWAS and also at the level of the African Union. And the focus is one, the concern about the rising coups on the African continent. And, part of the reasons that, we have seen given by the coup plotters mostly is, attributed to the rise of, terrorism, on the continent, in itself. So, aside, having these meetings, what kind of practical, strategies should be adopted by these African leaders to have a kind of a collaborative, approach towards dealing with this?
Well, the major issue, yes, of course, the issue of rising insecurity is one of the cardinal principles or measures that the coup dictat are hiding under, but I believe so much that it is more or less the issues of injustice. It is more or less the issues of inability and lack of capability, most of the leadership issues of governance. Because it is this issue of governance. If we have good governance in most of the African states, you wouldn't have found a kind of the issues, the security issues and the security challenges we're having. So the economic kind of issues, the challenges of issues of in governance, the challenges of kind of the way and manner to which the leaders are exhibiting themselves, the way they are managing resources.
So all of this is interconnected, if you look at it. I mean, because of this, lack of, good governance. Terrorism finds a breeding ground, on the continent, in the sense that recruitment becomes very easy for some of these guys, and all of that. So
human need alternatives.
Exactly. So everything is kind of interconnected, but the focus has been more on let's restore democracy on the continent. But not many people are talking about the root causes, of
so if you look
what
at
led us to what is
democracy?
We are now.
Democracy is all about good governance. So if democracy is not being practiced because of the attitude, everybody will have first tenure, will want to have second tenure, and will even want constitution to be changed so that they want to live for life.
So with all of these coups that we're seeing, is the African continent heading for a doom of some sort?
Well, I doubt much if at all the continent is really moving to the promised land. Because so many crises and so many issues will really come up going by, because the leaders are not ready to change themselves. And the recruitment process, looking at the available resources all over, the Western world and the other part of Asian countries want to take advantage of the leadership style in Africa. So if they allow the continent to remain peaceful, if they allow the continent to have a good governance, then there will be a kind of it will go against their own internal policy or external policy, which they want to have control over a number of resources in terms of gold, in terms of petrol and other things. So these are part of the reasons. So in this case, we're advocating for African leaders to sit down to their responsibility and also talk back to themselves. Let them govern people according to what the interest of the majority, not according to the interest of the minority.
this is not new. This is not a new thing on the continent. We've had coups in the past, decades ago, you know, and we're still having the same conversations. Not much, you know, has changed. So one is wondering, I mean, do you think that maybe we should begin to think with the kind of democracy practice in Africa? Maybe democracy, the kind of democracy that we practice is not suited for the continent. Maybe we should look at maybe other forms of government that maybe will work better for the African continent. I don't know, maybe just something about our democracy that is not really
I think the issue is not with democracy. The issue is with our leaders. So it is the leaders that are supposed to change themselves, not the system. The system is there. The democratizing Africa is the best. But the strategy of implementation.
But how do
we have the system?
When people,
you know, when you have a car, let me tell you one thing. When you have a new car, and you say, yes, this car can reverse, and it can also go with the front. So you choose to drive it by reversing.
So it seems.
So wherever you go, people will see you reversing.
So do we need somebody to actually push us? You know, to actually we
don't really need. But if care is not taken, the youth will push us to whether we like it or not. A lot of demonstrations will come up. A lot of strikes will come up. A lot of coups will continue to come up. And the issue, so many changes. Government will come up after 2-3 years. It will be toppled by military. So military will be pressurized to hand over to the democracy. So the Democrats will take over, and they will not be able to practice democratization or whatever. So the issue, the challenge is about using the system we have. We are always debating between the operating system that we sign, and we also use our own psychology to bring about a new, entirely different mechanism. And we say we want to govern people. And those people will also refer to the Constitution and say no. That is it.
Well, thank you so much for coming on the program.
Yes.
It's been very, very interesting talking to us about insecurity in the country, and we hope to have you next time.
Thank you for...
Yeah, we've been speaking with Dr. Yahuza Ahmed Geto, who is a security consultant here, giving us perspectives on recent happenings on the security, on not just in Nigeria, but even on the continent. We'll take a short breather now, and then when we come back, the show will continue. Please stay with us.